Hey, and welcome again to our segment of You Asked It. Today I'm doing something a little bit different because I am driving in the car. It's about the only place I can get any peace and quiet. And I'm going to answer a question that I received on Instagram through direct message. And it simply asks this: if God knows everything and knew that Satan would rebel and of course become evil, then why did God create Satan in the first place? That's a great question, and people have been wrestling with that for years and years. And so I just want to commend the questioner. You're not alone in your questions. You are on the right track in terms of thinking. However, when it comes to this answer, nobody has ever been able to just come up with an answer that satisfies everyone. And so today, my answer might not satisfy you either. Paul, in his letter to the Romans, says, oh, the magnificent mysteries of God. Basically, God's ways are so much higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. God sees things that we don't see. And like you said, He sees everything. So if God sees everything, then God sees outcomes that we might not think make sense today. And so what we're in is we're in the middle of the story, and we haven't played this out to the end. So if Satan is in the middle of creating all this chaos and problems right now, all this sin and pain and suffering, we don't see how this ends. The things that we see as evil and damaging today, in the end, will be woven by God into a beautiful tapestry to redeem and to save as many people as is possible, to bring about as much good in the world as is possible. So if we're looking at somebody like Satan and thinking, you know, it would be better if they never existed, the shorter answer to that is we can't prove that. God knows all. And in the story of Joseph in the Bible, Joseph ends up going through all this mess and all this hurt because his brothers are jealous and evil and beat him. They don't like him. They beat him. They throw him down into a pit, and then they end up selling him into slavery and taking his brand new coat and dipping it in goat's blood and telling their dad that they found it, and then leading him to the belief that Joseph was dead. So nobody ever goes looking for Joseph. Joseph goes to Egypt, sold to a man named Potiphar, and in the house of Potiphar, Potiphar sees that Joseph is a good leader and starts taking good care of his house. But what happens then is Potiphar's wife starts putting the moves on old Joe, and Joe turns her down until finally she gets mad and yells rape. Then Joseph is convicted of that crime, thrown into prison, and lay in prison for years and years until finally Pharaoh had a dream, and Joseph was able to interpret that dream, and then we know that Joseph became the second in charge of Egypt. So after years of being in charge of Egypt, Joseph's brothers find their way in front of Joseph, and they come to him and they ask him for food, and he had his time to basically get his revenge. They find out that this Egyptian in front of them is really their long-lost brother. They are begging for their life and they're pleading, and Joseph says, no, don't you know that you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good? And basically that God was able to use the events of evil people and an evil situation, and He was able to use it to save many other people's lives, people that would have never been touched by Joseph had this situation never occurred. So that comes at the very end of Genesis, and I think it's the answer to a question that goes back to Adam and Eve, and that is why did this happen? That even while Adam and Eve were eating the fruit in a way that it would have been meant for evil, God ended up using those things to reveal himself in his self-giving love and to come and to heal our broken world through Jesus. And we would have never discovered the magnificent riches of God had it not been for that. And so what we meant for evil, God meant for good. And God knows all, and he sees the end of the story, and he uses it for his glory. So that is the short answer to a very long, difficult philosophical discussion. I hope you found it helpful, and I'll talk to you next time.